was a quiet evening in Kentucky, the kind that settles softly over small towns when the air turns gold and the streets grow still. Inside their modest home, Chris Combs and his wife, Brittany, sat at the kitchen table, a place that had heard their laughter, their worries, and their long conversations about life after the cameras stopped rolling. Chris was 44 now. His face carried the lines of someone who'd seen hard days but survived them, someone who had known what it meant to fight for another chance. Brittany, 36, still had that spark in her eyes, hopeful, full of dreams, sometimes afraid to speak them out loud. That night, her voice trembled as she finally did. "Chris," she said softly, "I want to have a baby." The words hung in the air, tender and heavy. Chris looked up from his coffee, trying to hide the flicker of surprise in his eyes. It wasn't that he hadn't thought about it before, he had. But he was a grandfather now. He'd already raised his kids, taught them how to drive, helped them move into their first apartments. He'd been there for their birthdays, for the heartbreaks, for everything in between. He took a deep breath. "You really mean that?" Brittany nodded. Her voice cracked when she spoke again. "I've always wanted to be a mom. I love your kids, Chris. I love your grandkids. But I want one of my own. Just once, I want to know what that feels like." Chris reached across the table, his hand finding hers. "You know I'd do anything for you," he said, his voice low, filled with something between love and fear. Anything. For years, fans of 1000 LB Sisters had watched Chris and Brittany quietly anchor the chaos of the Slaton family. Tammy and Amy's dramatic weight loss journeys often stole the spotlight, but Chris, steady, funny, self-deprecating, became the family's backbone on-screen and off. Viewers admired his no-nonsense humor and his determination to take control of his health. Now, as cameras rolled for the show's 7th season, his story was taking a deeply personal turn, one that wasn't about scales or surgery, but about something much more fragile, the dream of becoming a father again. Brittany had been struggling for months. She'd watched Amy become a mother, cradling baby Gage and later little Glenn, and though she was happy for her sister-in-law, something inside her ached. Every time she helped Chris babysit one of his grandkids, tying shoes, wiping little hands, reading bedtime stories, a quiet thought echoed in her heart. This is what I want. But her body hadn't cooperated. When she first spoke about it on camera, tears filled her eyes. "I just don't understand," she said. "I've wanted this for so long. I feel like I'm doing everything right, but it just doesn't happen. Maybe it's me. Maybe it's my weight." It wasn't easy for Brittany to say those words, especially on national television. For years, she'd watched her husband and his sisters fight their own battles with weight and health, and now it was her turn to face the same fear, that her body might be standing between her and the family she dreamed of having. Chris listened quietly as she poured her heart out. He'd been there himself, standing on a scale that made him feel small, wondering if he'd ever see a different number, wondering if his life would ever change. When Brittany told him she wanted to have weight loss surgery, he understood immediately. He didn't try to talk her out of it. He didn't make promises he couldn't keep. He just nodded, his voice gentle but certain. "If that's what you want, then we'll make it happen." Their love story had never been flashy. It wasn't built on red carpets or social media fame. It was made in fast food kitchens, in early mornings and late night shifts. Back in 2012, before the cameras, before the surgeries, before the fame, Chris had been a manager at a McDonald's. Brittany worked there too, her hair pulled back under her cap, her smile the only thing bright enough to cut through the hum of fryers and the buzz of fluorescent lights. He noticed her right away. Her laugh, the way she took care of people, the quiet kindness she showed even when she was exhausted. They started as coworkers, then friends, and one evening after a long shift, when everyone else had gone home, Chris found himself standing by the counter joking with her, and realizing he didn't want the night to end. By 2016, he'd proposed. Brittany said yes without hesitation. They married that October, long before 1000 LB Sisters ever aired, and built a life rooted in patience, humor, and shared dreams. Their marriage wasn't perfect, but it was real. The age gap, 8 years between them, had never been a problem. If anything, it made them balance each other out. Chris brought steadiness. Brittany brought warmth and wonder. They laughed at the same silly things, leaned on each other during surgeries and recoveries, and built a rhythm that worked. By the time their wedding reached its 7th anniversary, Chris marked it with a simple Instagram post, a photo of the two of them, smiling, his caption reading, 7 years. I said I do, and I wouldn't change a thing about this journey we're on together. It wasn't the kind of post meant to go viral, but it did. Fans flooded the comments, couple goals. You two give me hope. You can tell she's your best friend. And she was. Still, behind the laughter and the social media smiles, Britney carried a quiet sadness. Every time she held Chris's grandson, she felt both joy and a sting of longing. When the little boy called her grandma, her heart swelled. But later, when she was alone, she'd find herself wondering if she'd ever hear a baby of her own say, Mom. One evening, during filming, Britney sat on the couch, eyes wet. It's not that I'm not happy, she said softly to the producers. I want this one thing. I want to know what it's like to look down at a baby that's mine. I want to give Chris that too. I want to see him hold our baby. She looked at him then, and for a moment, the cameras captured something raw and real, the way Chris's face softened, the way his jaw tightened as if he were fighting emotion. Britt, he said gently, I've got kids. I've got grandkids. I didn't think I'd be talking about diapers again at this age, but if it's what you want, then we'll find a way. He didn't say it lightly. He knew what it would take. The doctor visits, the risks, the doubts about his own energy, his own body. He'd already been through skin removal surgery, lost over 150 pounds, and rebuilt his life from scratch. But this was about more than health. It was about giving Britney the chance to feel complete. They both knew it wouldn't be easy. At 44, Chris was painfully aware that time was not on their side. His own kids were grown. Some of them had babies of their own. If he and Britney had a child now, that baby would be younger than his grandchildren, a thought that made him chuckle and cringe all at once. I'd be the only granddad at the playground chasing his own kid, he joked one afternoon, trying to lighten the mood. But the truth lingered underneath. It scared him. Britney laughed, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. I don't care what people think, she said quietly. I just care that it's ours. For her, the biggest hurdle wasn't age, it was her health. Like Chris once did, she'd been struggling with her weight for years, and doctors had warned her that pregnancy could be risky unless she lost a significant amount first. I just want to be healthy enough to try, she told him. That's all I want. Chris understood that look in her eyes. It was the same determination that had pushed him through surgery and months of pain, through learning how to move again, how to breathe again without oxygen. He saw that fire in Britney now. I'll be there for every step, he said, taking her hand. Every appointment, every pound you lose, every hard day. We'll do it together. And he meant it. When filming for 1000 LB Sisters Season 7 began, the storyline of Chris and Britney's baby journey quickly captured fans' attention. Amidst the familiar chaos of Tammy's recovery and Amy's new marriage, their story felt different, tender, hopeful, deeply human. In one of the early episodes, Britney sat across from a doctor, her voice trembling but firm. I want to be a mom, she said. I want to do whatever I have to do. The doctor nodded, explaining the risks, the timelines, the procedures. It was overwhelming, but Britney didn't back down. Later that night, back home, Chris wrapped his arms around her. You did good today, he murmured. She smiled through tears. You think so? I know so. Outside, the Kentucky night was quiet. The cicadas hummed, the stars blinked faintly above their small town. Inside, Chris and Britney sat close, their future uncertain. But for the first time in a long while, full of possibility. The next morning, sunlight poured through the curtains, painting warm stripes across the living room floor. Chris sat on the couch, scrolling through his phone, but his mind wasn't on social media. He was thinking about what Britney had said the night before, the way her voice had cracked, the quiet desperation in her eyes when she talked about wanting a baby. He'd always thought of himself as a simple man. He worked hard, loved his family, cracked jokes to keep the mood light. But beneath that easygoing humor, there was a man who worried. About his health, about his family, about what the future held. Now, there was something new to worry about. Could he really do this all over again? He looked over at Britney, who was standing in the kitchen, humming softly as she poured herself coffee. Her hair was a little messy, and she was still in her pajamas, but to him, she looked beautiful. She had this way of making ordinary mornings feel special. "Hey, Britt," he said, breaking the silence. She turned to him with a half smile. "Yeah?" Half smile. "Yeah? You really ready for this? I mean, really ready?" She nodded, but there was a hesitation in her eyes. "I am. I know it won't be easy, but I've thought about this for a long time, Chris. I'm tired of waiting for the right time." "There's never a right time." He leaned back, rubbing the back of his neck. "You're right about that," he said. "There's always going to be something. Money, time, health. But if it's what you want—" He trailed off, letting the words hang in the air. Brittany set her coffee down and walked over to him. She sat beside him and rested her hand on his leg. "I know it's asking a lot," she said softly. "You've already raised your kids. You've been through so much, but I don't want to get old and wonder what if." Chris looked at her, really looked at her, and he saw the fear underneath her determination. He'd seen that same fear in the mirror years ago, right before his own surgery. The fear of failure, of disappointment, of not being enough. He took her hand. "Then we'll do it," he said simply. "We'll go see the doctor, figure out what needs to happen. Whatever it takes." Brittany's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were tears of relief. She leaned in and hugged him tightly, burying her face against his shoulder. That moment, quiet, unfiltered, full of love, was what fans didn't always see. The cameras caught the humor and the chaos, but it was these private exchanges that made their relationship special. Later that week, they drove to the clinic together for Brittany's first consultation. The car ride was mostly silent, except for the hum of the road and the sound of country music playing faintly from the radio. Chris kept glancing at her, his hand occasionally brushing hers on the center console. "You nervous?" he asked. "A little," Brittany admitted. "Mostly excited. I don't want to get my hopes up and then have someone tell me I can't do it." Chris nodded. "That's not going to happen," he said, but even he knew that wasn't something he could promise. When they arrived, the waiting room was quiet except for the sound of papers shuffling and a distant television playing some morning talk show. Brittany filled out the forms, her hand trembling slightly as she wrote her name. When they finally sat down with the doctor, Brittany explained everything: her weight struggles, her dream of becoming a mom, her decision to have bariatric surgery. The doctor listened patiently, then began explaining the process: the pre-surgery diet, the medical clearances, the recovery time, and the waiting period before trying for pregnancy. "It's not impossible," the doctor said gently, "but it's a journey. You'll need to commit to major lifestyle changes before and after surgery, and it may take a year or two before your body is ready for pregnancy." Brittany nodded, holding on to every word. "I'll do whatever I have to," she said. Chris sat beside her, quiet, absorbing everything. He wasn't scared of the surgery itself. He'd done it himself. He knew the pain, the risks, the emotional ups and downs that came with it. What scared him was the thought of seeing Brittany go through the same thing. When they left the clinic, Brittany seemed lighter. She smiled for the first time that day. "It's happening," she said, almost whispering it to herself. "It's really happening," Chris smiled back, though a small part of him still worried. He knew better than anyone that the surgery wasn't a magic fix. It was hard. It was lonely sometimes. And it changed everything. Not just your body, but your mind, your relationships, even how people looked at you. That night, while Brittany was already asleep, Chris sat alone in the living room scrolling through old photos. Pictures from before his own surgery, or when he was heavier, slower, always tired. Then newer ones, him crossing the finish line of his first 5K, his smile wide, his eyes alive. He thought about the caption he'd written after that race. "This journey ain't easy, but it's worth every step." Now Brittany was about to start her own version of that same journey. And this time, he wasn't the one fighting for change. He was the one who had to watch someone he loved go through it. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of doctor appointments, lab work, and diet prep. The production crew filmed some of it, but Chris and Brittany tried to keep most of it private. This was their story, not just another reality show plotline. At home, Chris cooked her meals, joined her for walks, and cheered her on through every small victory. When she lost her first 10 pounds, they celebrated with a quiet dinner at home, grilled chicken, steamed veggies, and a small candle flickering between them. I know it's not exactly a fancy date night, Chris joked. Brittany laughed. It's perfect, she said. I just feel proud of myself. For the first time in a long time. You should, Chris replied. You're doing great. They clinked their glasses of water together like champagne flutes. But not every day was easy. There were mornings when Brittany woke up crying from hunger or frustration. There were nights when the scale didn't move. And she questioned everything. Her decision. Her body, even her worth. One night, after a particularly rough weigh-in, she sat on the edge of their bed, shoulders shaking. What if I can't do this? She whispered. What if I never lose enough weight to have a baby? Chris knelt in front of her, placing his hands on her knees. Britt, look at me, he said. You can do this. You already are. You've come too far to stop now, she shook her head. But what if it's too late? I'm not in my 20s anymore. What if it just doesn't happen? Chris hesitated. He didn't have the answers she wanted, but he also knew giving up wasn't an option. Then we'll cross that bridge when we get there, he said softly. But right now, all you gotta do is keep going. 1 step, 1 pound at a time. She looked up at him then, really looked, and something in her face softened. She nodded slowly. Okay, she whispered. It was in moments like that, quiet, raw, untelevised, that their love showed its true strength. Months passed, and the surgery date finally came. Brittany was nervous, but she tried to stay brave. The night before, she and Chris sat up late watching TV, pretending everything was normal. When the clock hit midnight, she turned to him and smiled faintly. You were right, she said. It's worth every step. He smiled back, remembering his own words years earlier. You're damn right it is. The morning of the surgery, the hospital was cold and bright. Chris held her hand right up until the nurses wheeled her away. He stood there watching the doors close, that same old ache in his chest returning, the fear of losing someone you love. He paced the hallway for hours, texting family, answering producer questions, pretending to be calm. But inside he was praying, silently, fiercely, like a man begging for time. When the doctor finally came out and said the surgery was a success, Chris exhaled so hard he almost stumbled. She's doing great, the doctor said. She'll be groggy for a while, but everything went smoothly. When he walked into her recovery room, Brittany was pale but smiling weakly. Hey, she mumbled, her voice hoarse. Chris leaned down, kissed her forehead. You did it, baby. You really did it. A small tear slid down her cheek. Now we just have to wait, she whispered. Chris nodded, squeezing her hand. We've waited this long, he said softly. What's a little longer? The weeks that followed were hard, harder than either of them had expected. Brittany struggled with pain, nausea, and emotional swings. Some days she was determined. Other days she was exhausted and angry. Chris stayed patient, cooking her small meals, cleaning up when she couldn't move, and never once complaining. Every time she broke down, he reminded her of why she started, not just for the baby, but for herself. Slowly, the weight started to come off. First a few pounds, then a few more. Her clothes began to fit differently. Her energy returned, and one morning, months later, she stood in front of the mirror and smiled. A real, radiant smile. I feel like me again, she said quietly. Chris came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. You look like you, he said. The woman I fell in love with? Only stronger. She turned to face him. Do you really think this could work? She asked. That we could actually have a baby? He hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, he said, I do. Because I believe in you. Outside, the morning sun streamed through the window, painting them both in light. Two people standing at the edge of something new, scared but hopeful, ready to try again. Brittany's recovery was slower than she expected. At first, every day felt like a small battle, learning how to eat again, measuring out portions, fighting off cravings. But more than the physical struggle, it was the emotional toll that wore on her. There were moments she wanted to cry and scream and give up. But every time that happened, Chris was there, calm, patient, steady. He'd sit with her, help her sip water, or distract her with stories about his day. One evening, as they sat watching reruns on the couch, Brittany leaned her head on his shoulder. Do you ever regret it? She asked quietly. He turned to her. Regret what? The surgery, she said. Changing everything. I mean, I know it's for the better, but sometimes I miss just being normal. Eating what I wanted, not thinking about every bite. Chris thought for a moment. Yeah, he said honestly. Sometimes I do. I miss big breakfasts and pizza nights. But then I think about how I used to feel. Tired all the time, in pain, scared I wouldn't live long enough to see my grandkids grow up. And then I remember why I did it. She nodded slowly. That's how I feel too, she whispered. I know I'll be glad later. It's just hard right now. I'll be glad later. It's just hard right now. He put his arm around her and kissed the top of her head. You're doing great, Britt. You just gotta give it time. The hard part don't last forever, but some days, the hard part did feel like it would last forever. Brittany's hormones were all over the place after surgery, and she sometimes found herself snapping at Chris over the smallest things. One morning, she burst into tears because he forgot to put protein powder in her shake. Another day, she got angry because he ate the last sugar-free pudding. Chris never yelled back. He'd just give her space, wait for her to calm down, and then hug her when she was ready. One afternoon, she apologized, eyes red and puffy. I don't know what's wrong with me, she said. I feel like I'm losing control. Chris smiled softly. You just had surgery that changed your whole body, he said. Your hormones are confused. It's okay. I can handle a few mood swings. That made her laugh through her tears. You sure about that? He chuckled. Pretty sure. I've been married long enough to know when to shut up and nod. She hit his arm playfully. You're such a smart aleck, he winked. That's why you married me. Over the next few months, Brittany's body began to transform. Her face slimmed down, her energy improved, and she started smiling more. Fans noticed too. Clips from the show and new social media posts showed a different Brittany. In confessionals, she spoke about her hopes, her fears, and her dream of becoming a mother. I know some people think I'm crazy wanting a baby at my age, she said. But this is something I've wanted my whole life. I'm not giving up. Meanwhile, Chris's storyline focused on his continued maintenance and his plans for a second skin removal surgery. He joked with producers about needing a few more tweaks, but privately, he was worried about the toll it might take, both physically and financially. He'd told Brittany he'd figure it out, and he meant it. But now, with her medical bills coming in, it wasn't easy. The show helped with exposure, but the paychecks weren't life-changing. Most of the time, they still lived like regular folks. One evening, as they sat reviewing paperwork, Brittany sighed. I hate that everything costs so much, she said. We're trying to get healthy, and it feels like we're being punished for it. Chris nodded. I know, but we'll manage. We always do, Brittany smiled faintly. I don't want you stressing about money just because of me. He shook his head. Britt, you're my wife. We're in this together. Your dream's my dream now. That sentence stayed with her. She started to push herself harder, following her diet to the letter, walking every day, journaling her progress. For the first time, she began to believe it could really happen. 6 months after her surgery, Brittany went in for a follow-up appointment. When the nurse called her name and read her weight aloud, she gasped. She'd lost 86 pounds. Tears welled in her eyes as she looked at Chris. I did it, she whispered. I actually did it, Chris grinned ear to ear. I told you. You're killing it, baby. She wiped her tears, laughing. This is just the start. On the drive home, she couldn't stop smiling. She rolled down the window, letting the breeze hit her face. For the first time in years, she felt free, like she was getting her life back. But underneath that joy, there was still uncertainty. They both knew the baby question was coming soon. Her doctor had told her to wait at least a year after surgery before trying to conceive. Brittany marked the months on her calendar, counting down the days. Meanwhile, Chris began preparing for his own upcoming skin removal consultation. He wanted to fix the areas his first surgery hadn't addressed, the excess skin around his chest and upper arms. At dinner one night, Brittany asked, Are you nervous? He shrugged. A little, but I've done it before. Just hope it's worth it. It will be, she said. You deserve to feel good about yourself. He smiled at her across the table. You saying that means a lot, Britt. You've been through so much lately, but you still look out for me. Always, she said simply. As they talked, the camera crew captured their conversation, the gentle back and forth that fans loved. Real love. Not scripted drama, but when the cameras were gone, they had quieter, more vulnerable talks. Chris admitted he was scared of being a father again at his age. I love the idea of a baby, he said one night, but sometimes I wonder if I'm too old. I already got grandkids. What if I can't keep up? Brittany took his hand. You'll keep up, she said. You're stronger than you think. Look how far you've come. You're not the same man you were 5 years ago." He smiled faintly. "No, I'm not. But you're right, I'm a better man now. Because of you." That night, they lay in bed holding hands, the sound of the ceiling fan humming softly above them. They didn't talk about babies or surgeries or bills, just breathed in the quiet peace of a moment they both knew was rare. By early the next year, Britney had lost over 130 pounds. Her transformation was stunning, not just physically but emotionally. She started sharing motivational posts online, encouraging others to believe in themselves. Fans flooded her comments with love. "You're such an inspiration. You give me hope. You and Chris are my favorite couple on the show." The outpouring of support pushed her even harder. But with success came pressure. Pressure to stay perfect, to keep losing, to be the strong one. Chris noticed it before she did. He saw how she'd stare at the mirror a little too long or skip meals trying to drop faster. One evening, he finally said something. "Britt, I love you, but you gotta take it easy. You're pushing too hard." "I just want to stay on track," she said defensively. "You are," he said gently, "but this ain't a race. You're doing great. Don't let the internet make you forget that," she sighed. "It's just, everyone's watching now. I don't want to let people down." He leaned closer. "You don't owe anybody anything, Britt. This is your life, not theirs. You've already won." Tears filled her eyes again, but this time she smiled through them. "You always know what to say." He laughed softly. "Yeah, well, I've had some practice." A few weeks later, Chris went in for his own surgery. Brittany sat in the waiting room this time, the roles reversed. She prayed, paced, and checked the clock every few minutes, exactly like he had months earlier. When the doctor came out and told her the procedure was a success, she exhaled in relief. When she saw him afterward, pale and groggy, she grabbed his hand. "Hey, old man," she teased softly. He smiled weakly. "Hey, future mama," she laughed, wiping her tears. "Don't you dare make me cry right now," as he recovered. Brittany took care of him just like he had for her, making small meals, cleaning up, sitting beside him during sleepless nights. Their bond deepened in ways even the cameras couldn't capture. They had both been broken, healed, and rebuilt, not just their bodies, but their hearts. When Chris was finally able to get up and walk again, he looked at Brittany and said, "You know something? I think we're gonna be okay," she smiled. "I know we are." A full year had passed since Brittany's surgery, and the changes were undeniable. Her walk was lighter, her laughter louder, and her confidence, something she hadn't felt in years, finally shone through. The morning of her one-year checkup, she stood in front of the mirror for a long time. Her reflection looked like a different woman, slimmer, healthier, and more alive. But behind that reflection, she still saw pieces of her old self, the version that had doubted, cried, and feared she'd never make it this far. Chris walked in, adjusting his shirt. "You ready for this, superstar?" he teased. Brittany smiled nervously. "I don't know if I'll ever be ready. I'm scared they'll tell me I didn't lose enough." He chuckled softly. "You've lost more than most folks ever do. Whatever that scale says, you already won." She took a deep breath and nodded. "Okay, let's do it." At the doctor's office, she sat on the edge of the exam table, fidgeting with her hands. When the nurse read the number out loud, 174 pounds lost, Brittany's jaw dropped. For a few seconds, she didn't move. Then tears filled her eyes and she whispered, "Oh my God, I can't believe it." Chris grinned, his eyes wet too. "Told you," he said softly. "You did it, Britt." The doctor smiled warmly. "You've come a long way, Brittany. Your blood pressure's normal, your labs look fantastic. You're doing exactly what you should." Brittany couldn't stop smiling. "So, when can we talk about having a baby?" The room went quiet for a moment. The doctor folded his hands. "I was wondering when you'd ask that," he said with a small laugh. "You've done incredible work, but I still recommend waiting at least a few more months, just to make sure your body is completely stable." Her smile faded a little, but she nodded. "I understand." Chris put a hand on her knee. "We'll wait as long as we need to." Later in the car, Brittany stared out the window. "I know he's right," she said quietly. I've waited so long already." Chris reached over and took her hand. "We'll get there," he said. "You've already proven you can do anything you set your mind to." She turned to him, tears threatening again. "You really think it'll happen for us?" I know it will, he said simply. One way or another. That night, she journaled her feelings, something her therapist had encouraged her to do since surgery. She wrote about her fear of getting older, her hope of becoming a mom, and how grateful she was for Chris. She also wrote about the pressure she felt to be perfect, even though she knew perfection wasn't real. As the weeks passed, Brittany's body continued to adjust. She started incorporating small strength workouts and took long walks in the evenings. Sometimes she'd post clips online of her progress, short, real, and unfiltered. One video showed her sitting on the porch, talking to the camera. This journey hasn't been easy, she said. There were days I wanted to quit. But if I can do it, so can you. Don't let fear stop you from living. The video went viral. Comments poured in, praising her honesty. Chris watched it later that night and smiled proudly. You're turning into a motivational speaker now? He teased, she laughed. Nah, just being real. Well, real looks good on you, he said, wrapping his arm around her. But beneath their quiet evenings and laughter, there was still a lingering ache. They both wanted that next chapter, a baby, more than they could admit out loud. Brittany began tracking her cycles and vitamins, researching fertility after bariatric surgery. She'd whisper prayers before bed, asking for strength and patience. Then, one afternoon, she called Chris at work, her voice trembling. I took a test, she said softly. His heart skipped. And? It's negative, she whispered. Again. He paused, then said gently, Hey, it's okay. It's not the end of the road. I know, she said, but her voice cracked. It just hurts. When he got home that night, she was sitting on the couch, silent tears running down her face. He sat beside her and pulled her close. I hate seeing you like this, he said quietly. But we can't lose hope. We've come too far to stop now. She nodded into his shoulder. I'm just tired of waiting. I know, he whispered. But everything worth having takes time. You taught me that. She looked up at him and managed a small smile. You always know what to say. Over the next few months, Brittany's focus shifted again, from the baby dream to maintaining her new life. She joined a local support group for weight loss surgery patients and began mentoring others who were just starting their journeys. At one meeting, a woman in her 30s stood up and said, I saw you on the show. You're the reason I finally decided to do this. Brittany's eyes filled. Thank you, she said softly. That means more than you know. After the meeting, Chris told her, You realize you're changing lives now, right? She smiled shyly. I'm just trying to pay it forward. In truth, she found healing in helping others. Each story reminded her how far she'd come and how fragile that progress could be. Meanwhile, Chris's recovery was nearly complete. He'd lost even more weight after his skin removal surgery and was feeling stronger than he had in years. The two often worked out together, not in a gym, but in their backyard, laughing as they did squats or walked laps around the driveway. One afternoon, as they sat cooling off on the porch, Brittany turned to him. Do you ever think about how crazy our lives are now? A few years ago, I couldn't even walk up the stairs. And now we're out here doing lunges, he grinned. Yeah, never thought I'd see the day I'd be doing squats with my wife. She laughed. See? Miracles do happen. Chris took her hand and looked at her seriously. You're my miracle, Britt, she blushed. Stop, you're gonna make me cry again. I'm serious, he said. You saved me from myself. And no matter what happens next, baby or not, I'm happy. Right here. With you? She smiled softly, leaning her head against his shoulder. You always know how to ruin my mascara. They both laughed. But the truth was, things weren't always picture perfect. Some nights, Brittany struggled with cravings again, especially when stress built up. Once, she confessed to sneaking a small piece of candy, then crying about it afterward. Chris didn't scold her. He just reminded her, one piece doesn't undo everything. You're human. Don't beat yourself up. Those small moments, forgiveness, understanding, kept them grounded. As the show filmed new episodes, fans noticed how different their dynamic felt. It wasn't just about weight loss anymore. It was about love, patience, and survival. In one confessional, Chris said, People think this is just a diet journey. But it's not. It's about learning to live again. To be honest, I've learned more about love from this than I ever thought I would. Brittany's confessionals were equally moving. I used to think I wasn't worth it, she said, looking directly into the camera. But now I know I am. And if I can find that strength, anyone can. The producers captured their gentle smiles, the unspoken affection in every glance. Fans began calling them the heart of the show. Then, one morning in early spring, Britney woke up feeling different. Nauseous, dizzy, emotional. She tried to brush it off, thinking it was just stress or hormones. But something in her gut told her it was more. She took another test. Then another, and this time, 2 faint pink lines appeared. She stared at it, trembling, covering her mouth as tears streamed down her face. When Chris walked in, she was sitting on the bathroom floor, crying and laughing at the same time. "What's wrong?" he asked, panicked. She held up the test with shaking hands. "Chris," she whispered, "we did it." He froze, staring at the test, then at her. "You mean—" She nodded, crying harder. "I'm pregnant." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then he let out a choked laugh, dropped to his knees, and wrapped his arms around her. "You're kidding me," he whispered into her hair. "Oh my God, Britt, I can't believe it," she sobbed. "After everything?" He pulled back, looking into her teary eyes. "You did it, baby. You really did it." They sat there on the floor, holding each other, both laughing and crying, the raw kind of emotion that words couldn't capture. Later that evening, they sat on the porch as the sun set. Britney rested her head on his shoulder, her hand resting over her stomach. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I know," he said. "But we'll face it together, like we always do." She looked at him and smiled softly. "We really made it, didn't we?" He nodded, eyes glistening. "Yeah, we sure did." The next few weeks were a blur of excitement and disbelief. Britney could hardly believe she was finally pregnant. Every morning, she'd wake up and check the test again, just to make sure the lines hadn't vanished. Chris was protective from the start. He'd hover around her constantly, reminding her to drink water, eat enough protein, and rest whenever she looked even slightly tired. "Chris, I'm fine," she'd laugh. He'd grin. "You're fine now, but I'm not taking any chances." They told their families a few weeks later. Tammy was the first person they called. When she heard the news, Tammy screamed loud enough for the whole street to hear. "You're lying!" "Oh my God, Britney, are you serious?" Britney laughed through her tears. "I'm serious. It finally happened." "I'm so proud of you," Tammy said, crying. "You two deserve this more than anyone." Amy, too, was over the moon. "Now I won't be the only one chasing kids around Thanksgiving," she joked. "Guess we'll need a bigger table." Even the crew members on 1000lb Sisters were emotional. They'd watched Britney's entire journey, from struggling to walk, to undergoing surgery, to now becoming a mom. When filming resumed, the producers captured the moment Britney shared the pregnancy news with Chris on camera for the first time. The clip showed them sitting together on their couch, holding hands, both still overwhelmed. "I never thought I'd see this day," Chris said, his voice trembling. "We've been through hell and back, and here we are. I just hope I can keep up." Britney laughed through her tears. "You'll be the best dad." "I already know it." The months that followed were a mix of joy and anxiety. Pregnancy after weight loss surgery wasn't easy. Britney's doctors monitored her closely, making sure she was getting enough nutrients. Some days were rough. The nausea hit hard, and there were moments when the exhaustion felt unbearable. But every time she felt that tiny flutter inside her belly, she'd smile. "This little one is a fighter," she'd whisper. Chris would rest his hand over her stomach and smile softly. Just like their mama. They spent evenings planning the nursery, arguing playfully over names. "What about Grace?" Britney suggested one night. "Grace Combs?" He repeated, thinking. "I like it. But what if it's a boy?" "Then we'll figure it out," she said with a grin. "Let's just get through the next trimester first." As her pregnancy progressed, Britney's body changed again. Some days she felt insecure about the loose skin returning, or the stretch marks spreading across her belly. But Chris always reassured her. "You're beautiful," he'd say firmly. "You carried strength before, now you're carrying life. Don't forget that." Their bond grew deeper through every appointment, every ultrasound, every sleepless night of worry. At one appointment, the doctor smiled as the rhythmic sound of a heartbeat filled the room. Britney's eyes widened, and Chris immediately grabbed her hand. "That's our baby," she whispered. Chris nodded, tears in his eyes. "That's our miracle." The show captured that moment, raw, intimate, and real. Fans watching months later would flood social media with support, writing messages like, I cried watching this. They've come so far. And Britney deserves every bit of happiness, but pregnancy brought challenges too. Britney's iron levels dropped and she had to get supplements through IV infusions. She hated needles, but she faced it with determination. During one treatment, she looked at Chris and said quietly, "If I can do this, I can do anything." He smiled. "You already have." By the 7th month, Britney was glowing. Her energy had returned and she was finally enjoying her pregnancy. She'd post occasional updates online showing her baby bump with captions like, "Dreams really do come true. Chris built the crib himself, spending an entire weekend sanding and painting it a soft mint green. When he finished, he stood back and admired it, tears welling up in his eyes. Britney walked in and wrapped her arms around him. "You're such a softie," she teased. "Maybe," he said, laughing, "but this little one's gonna know how much they're loved." They filmed another heartfelt confessional for 1,000 LB sisters. Chris said, "I've had a lot of good things happen in my life. Losing the weight, getting healthy, marrying Britney, but nothing compares to this. Being a dad again, it just feels right." As Britney neared her due date, the Slaton family gathered for a small baby shower. The theme was Little Miracles, and the room was decorated with baby blue and pastel yellow balloons. Tammy helped hang the streamers, and Amy brought a cake shaped like a baby carriage. During the party, Britney stood to thank everyone. "When I started this journey," she said through tears, "I didn't think I'd ever be standing here, healthy, happy, and about to be a mom. Thank you for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself." Everyone applauded, and Tammy hugged her tightly. "I'm so proud of you, Britt. You're proof that second chances are real." A few weeks later, in the quiet early hours of a Sunday morning, Britney felt a sharp pain that made her gasp. "Chris," she whispered, shaking him awake, "I think it's time." He jumped up instantly. "You sure?" She nodded, breathing through another contraction. "Pretty sure." Within an hour, they were at the hospital. The cameras weren't there this time. This was their private moment. Labor was long and exhausting. Chris held her hand through every contraction, whispering encouragement. "You've got this. You're the strongest woman I know." After 12 grueling hours, a cry finally filled the room. Small, strong, and perfect. The nurse placed the baby on Britney's chest and time seemed to stop. Tears rolled down her face as she looked at the tiny miracle in her arms. "Hi, baby," she whispered. "We've been waiting for you." Chris leaned in, his voice breaking. "She's perfect." They named her Grace Lynn Combs. When the family came to visit the next day, the room was filled with tears and laughter. Tammy held the baby gently, her voice soft. "She's so beautiful, Britt. She's got your smile." Amy grinned. "Another cousin for my boys. We're gonna have a wild bunch running around soon." Even the nurses smiled, touched by the family's warmth. Later that evening, as the hospital lights dimmed, Chris sat beside Britney's bed, holding Grace in his arms. He looked at his daughter, then at his wife. "You did it," he whispered. "You made our dream real." Britney smiled, her eyes heavy with exhaustion and joy. "We did it," she said softly. He kissed her forehead. "You know, all those years I thought our story was about losing weight." But it wasn't. She looked up at him. "Then what was it about?" He smiled. "Finding life." She reached out, touching Grace's tiny hand. "And love," she added. He nodded, tears slipping down his cheek. "Yeah, and love." Months later, 1,000 LB Sisters aired the birth episode. It became one of the most emotional in the show's history. Fans across the world posted messages saying how inspired they felt watching Britney's transformation. Not just physical, but emotional and spiritual. One fan wrote, "She didn't just lose weight. She gained everything that matters." Another commented, "This show has changed how I see life. If Britney can go through all that and still believe in love, maybe I can too." In the final scene, Britney and Chris sat on their porch again, baby Grace asleep in her arms. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky orange and pink. Brittany looked out quietly. You know what I think? Chris glanced at her. What's that? I think all the hard stuff, the surgeries, the tears, the waiting, it was all leading us here. He nodded, smiling. Yeah, every bit of it. She leaned her head on his shoulder. I don't know what comes next, but I know we'll face it together. He kissed the top of her head. We always do. The camera pulled back slowly, capturing the three of them bathed in soft light. The couple who'd lost more than 400 pounds together and gained everything they'd ever dreamed of. Their laughter faded into the evening air as the credits rolled and a simple message appeared on screen. For anyone still fighting, don't give up. Miracles take time.